The plan worked, my husband exclaimed, gesturing around my late father's house. It might be old, but it's spacious and well located. From now on, my parents and I will live here, he added. How could I have ever loved someone so selfish? I thought, watching Ryder's smug smile grow even wider. While I stood there in shock, he continued his insults. This house of your father's is mine. Get out, my husband demanded angrily. As his parents' belongings were moved in, I realized Ryder had no idea about the truth. Seeing his smug face, I couldn't suppress a laugh. My name is Maeve Honeywell, and I have been living with my father and my husband, Ryder. Since my mother passed in high school, my father raised me with endless love, and my affection for him never wavered. When I suggested Ryder and I move in due to his health, Ryder was all for it. Are you sure? My father asked, smiling but looking worried. He didn't want to be a burden. But when I shared my wish to stay close, and Ryder agreed, he finally accepted. As Ryder and I moved into my childhood home and unpacked, my father smiled gently and said, "This is what I've always wanted." I mentioned it was also more convenient for my work. He made us coffee, showing his usual warmth, which we appreciated during our break. Later, Ryder suggested, "If you want, you could quit your job to take care of your father full-time." Surprised, I asked, "What do you mean?" He explained that with fewer expenses, I could focus on my father. Though I liked the idea, I worried about relying on Ryder financially, so I decided to keep working, appreciating his support. A month later, Ryder brought it up again. Living with my father had lightened my chores, so I started to consider it more seriously. When I voiced my concerns about the financial impact, Ryder reassured me, saying, "Don't worry about that, I'll handle it." Eventually, I decided to leave my job to focus on my father. At first, he objected, wanting me to keep working, but he understood when I explained my desire to be there for him. However, things soon changed. "I'm home," Ryder would say, and I'd greet him warmly, but he grew distant. One evening, as I watched TV with my dad, Ryder snapped, "Can you keep it down?" "I'm eating." "Oh, sorry," I replied, surprised. His attitude toward me changed, yet he acted normal when my father was around. I worried quitting my job added stress, but all I could do was apologize. One night, Ryder came home late without answering my calls. Later, I got an email saying he was on a business trip. These trips became more frequent, and he stopped telling me his plans. When my father noticed, Ryder would just say, "No problem. I'm working hard for our family," but his smile felt less genuine. Then, I received an abrupt email from my mother-in-law, asking for Ryder's work address without a greeting. My in-laws had always been cold toward me, so I was surprised and replied, asking why she needed it. She instantly called, furious. "You've made Ryder take care of your father while you sit at home. He's back at our house because of you. He forgot his lunch and I'm trying to bring it to him. What are you going to do about this?" Shocked, I realized Ryder had been staying with them during his business trips, and their words deeply unsettled me. Ryder told me it would be okay to quit my job, but I couldn't shake the feeling he had other intentions. Fighting back tears, I gave her his work address and ended the call. Trying to calm down, I made coffee in the living room where my father joined me. Smiling, I asked, "Would you like some coffee?" He looked at me, smiled, and said, "I'd love some." As we enjoyed our coffee, my father reminisced. "Your mom and I argued a lot when we were younger, but we always stayed honest. Couples who can argue and then make up grow stronger together." His words moved me, and I decided to have a serious talk with Ryder. "That's true, Dad. Thank you," I said, and he responded with a kind smile. I emailed Ryder, summarizing my conversation with his mother, and saying I wanted to talk. "I'm busy. Don't make a big deal out of this," he replied dismissively, making me sigh. Frustration and anger bubbled up, but I took a deep breath to calm down. Since then, Ryder stopped contributing financially to our household, ignoring my messages about living expenses. My love for him faded, and thoughts of divorce started crossing my mind. Disappointed in his irresponsibility, I decided to delay discussing divorce, not wanting to worry my father. Until then, I'll rely on my own savings accumulated before our marriage. I was getting used to Ryder being gone, enjoying quiet days with my dad, until he suddenly collapsed. At the hospital, we found out he didn't have much time. Overcome, I sat by his bedside, holding his hand, smiling through my tears, telling him he'd get better. My dad looked sad but tried to smile. When I went home to grab my things, the loneliness of the house, filled with memories, was too much. I broke down in tears. During this difficult time, Ryder sent a cold message. Since we're living separately, handle your own expenses. Maybe you can use your father's pension. Frustrated, I threw my phone, and my feelings for Ryder disappeared. Realizing it was pointless to dwell on him, I composed myself and prepared to go back to the hospital. Just then, I received good news in the mail that could change everything. Leaving the documents for later, I hurried to my father. My father's condition worsened, and I knew his time was running out. I spent those final days in the hospital, and each night I returned home in tears. He passed peacefully, and I was with him in his last moments. The grief was overwhelming, but his memory stayed deeply with me. With help from family, the funeral went smoothly, though Ryder and his family didn't attend. I hadn't told them directly, so I wasn't surprised. But days later, after settling the estate, Ryder showed up, bags in hand. "It's been a while. I heard your father passed away," he said. Seeing his face stirred anger in me, but I took a deep breath to stay calm. "What do you want?" "What's with the luggage?" I asked. "Isn't that a bit harsh for a husband coming home?" he replied with a smirk. "Oh, and this luggage? My parents' stuff, of course." Hearing him refer to himself as husband was infuriating after he had abandoned me and stopped supporting the household. His words made no sense to me. "Were you waiting for me? Jobless, struggling alone with expenses and looking after your father? Are you so happy you're speechless?" he sneered. I looked at him in silence. "No, seems I'm the one caught in your plan," Ryder added with sarcasm. His mention of a plan caught my attention, so I asked him to explain. His response was shocking. Living with an old man was something I couldn't accept. But if I'd asked for a divorce, I wouldn't have gotten this house. So I pretended to be the perfect husband, made you dependent, and ensured you'd be stuck with the elderly man. This house would then be mine, he concluded. Hearing this, I looked at Ryder in disbelief, feeling anger rise within me. "Your story doesn't add up. You left and stopped paying the bills," I retorted. Ryder scratched his head, irritated. "Yeah, I lost my patience, but I thought you'd never actually ask for a divorce." His smug smile made me wonder what I'd ever seen in him. I couldn't stand to see or hear him anymore. "The plan worked," he continued. "This house might be old, but it's spacious and well located. Starting today, my parents and I will live here." Could anyone be more self-centered? As I stood there in shock, he continued with more insults. "This house of your father's is mine. Get out." Watching his parents' belongings being moved in, I realized Ryder was completely unaware of the truth. Seeing him so smug, I couldn't help but burst into laughter, which confused him. "Are you crazy?" he snapped. "That word describes you perfectly," I replied, laughing as I prepared to reveal the truth. "Didn't you know this is my house? It could never be yours." Ryder froze, stunned as I continued. "Besides, we're no longer related. Didn't your mother tell you?" Ryder, shocked, immediately called someone, likely his mother. "What, Mom? Maeve is saying something strange. We're not divorced, right?" I overheard him say, panic in his voice. Listening to his frantic call, I saw that he finally understood the situation. After he hung up, Ryder's face twisted in confusion. "Did you really file for divorce?" he asked. "Yes," I replied, smiling. "The day my father went to the hospital, your mother sent me the completed form, which I gladly submitted. She has her moments, doesn't she?" I added. "Damn it," Ryder muttered. "It wasn't meant to be filed, that was just in case, not for real," he lamented. "But you filled it out, didn't you? Intentions aside, I completed the divorce as you wanted." "You should thank me," I said calmly, feeling relieved. His mother's harassment had ironically become the chance I needed to get the divorce I'd wanted. Later, Ryder anxiously asked, "Who will get the house?" I dismissed his concerns, explaining that since we'd lived together briefly and my father still held the assets at the time of our divorce, there was nothing to divide. "But what about the savings?" my ex-husband pressed, looking desperate. "Even the savings you had before marriage should be split." "Your claim has no basis," I replied calmly. He turned pale, tried to argue but could only stammer. Though tempted to mock him, I kept my composure. "Let's end this here," I said firmly. "Bringing your belongings into someone else's home uninvited is trespassing. If you stay any longer, I'll have to call the police." At this, Ryder quickly gathered his things and left. I sprinkled salt at the entrance, prayed by my parents' portraits, and said, "This is for the best. I'll grow stronger. Please watch over me." Thinking of my parents reunited in heaven brought me comfort. Determined to start fresh, I searched for a job. With a friend's recommendation, I quickly secured a position that suited my skills. A few days later, Ryder messaged, "Sorry for being stubborn. I wanted to start over. That's why I came to the house." I found it absurd, considered replying, but ignored him. Still, Ryder kept sending poetic messages like a persistent suitor. I'd share each poetic message with my coworkers, hoping for inspiration in my work as an illustrator for a cartoon editorial. "Look, the melodramatic stalker is back," I joked. Ryder had become a source of amusement, but his messages only made me uncomfortable, so I kept ignoring them. One day, the doorbell rang. Peeking through the peephole, I saw Ryder. Surprised he'd come in person, I immediately called the police. "I know you're in there. I see your car. Please, just listen. I'm really in trouble," he pleaded. "My parents sold their house because we thought we'd move in here. I have nowhere else to go. Help me." I felt no sympathy. Their assumption this house was theirs only showed their entitlement. The police convinced Ryder to leave, but he resisted until they escorted him away. After I ignored his Romeo emails, my in-laws began reaching out, first calling, then emailing when I didn't respond. "How can you ignore our situation and not reach out? We were family once. Isn't it cruel to be so indifferent? You made us lose our home and now we're stuck in a rundown apartment. Why not give us the house? You must have inherited it from your father. You're not struggling financially, and we quit our jobs. Take responsibility," and they pleaded. The apple didn't fall far from the tree. How could they be so oblivious to others? At first, I tried to ignore them, but eventually, I blocked Ryder and his family. Changing my contact info felt drastic, but blocking wasn't enough. One day, my ex-in-laws showed up at my door, voices loud. "Come out! You know we're struggling. Let's get back together. How can you ignore someone in need? What kind of person does that?" They knocked persistently, but I didn't hesitate to call the police. Suddenly, the noise stopped. Peeking through the peephole, I saw an unfamiliar man confronting my former in-laws. "Go home," he said sharply. "You're bothering people." My former in-laws looked puzzled by the man's unexpected appearance. "What did you say? Who are you? Are you her new lover?" they shot back. Unfazed, the man looked at them coldly. "Your behavior is the problem. Look around. This is a residential area. People are gathering because of you. You're causing a disturbance," he retorted. Through the peephole, I saw neighbors gathering, which was embarrassing, but watching my ex-family flustered was oddly satisfying. When the police arrived, one officer recognized Ryder and said, "It's you guys again." My ex-in-laws turned red with embarrassment. "How much trouble will you keep causing? Get a grip," officer added. I thanked him as he left, feeling relieved as I watched my ex-in-laws being escorted away and the neighbors dispersing. Hours later, the doorbell rang again. I looked through the peephole and saw the same man. Hesitating, I opened the door cautiously. With a warm smile, he said, "It's been a while. You should have told me you were back." I recognized him but couldn't quite place him until he added, "Don't tell me you've forgotten. It's been over 10 years. Remember me? I'm Frank." Hearing his name brought back a flood of memories. "Frankie, now I remember," I exclaimed, smiling. "Frank, my childhood friend from next door. We hadn't seen each other since we changed schools." "Finally remembered, huh?" Frank laughed. "I moved back here so we're neighbors again. It's been so long and I wanted to thank you for earlier. It really meant a lot to me." "Thanks again," I said. Frank just laughed, making me smile. We reminisced and I shared some recent struggles. He promised to be there for me, proving he was still a reliable friend. When I mentioned my father's passing, Frank offered to pay his respects, remembering him from our childhood. Having someone who shared my past was a real comfort. A few days later, I got an unexpected letter from a law firm. Shocked, I read I was being accused of infidelity and asked to pay damages. Then I saw an email from an unknown address titled, "Regarding the notification, your ex-husband Ryder has filed a lawsuit for marital infidelity. Admitting it now will avoid escalation. We plan to notify your workplace. To protect your future, we recommend resolving this soon." It was a thinly veiled threat, likely from my former in-laws, not a real lawyer. I suspected the document was fake, so I consulted a real lawyer who confirmed it. The supposed attorney wasn't even registered. Playing along, I replied that I'd consider their claims if they provided proof of my alleged infidelity. They responded, "Ryder endured immense emotional distress, and we seek compensation for that," but still offered no real proof. It seemed unlikely any real professionals were involved. There was no infidelity, hence no proof exists, I replied. It's hard to believe a professional would act on such unfounded claims. Don't you agree? They replied emotionally, "We're moved by Ryder's passion and want to help him. We expect your sincere cooperation and don't wish to escalate this further." Quite emotional for a professional, I replied coolly. "Impersonating a lawyer is illegal, you know. Just to confirm, you do hold legitimate qualifications?" After that, their responses stopped. Finally, I got another message. "I'm a professional, but your arguments were unbeatable. We're withdrawing the lawsuit." "There's no need to withdraw," I replied. "I'm calm about being falsely accused, and I'm ready to defend myself legally. Looking forward to meeting this passionate lawyer in court." All communication ceased after that. However, the silence didn't last long, as my former in-laws appeared at my door late one night, loudly begging for forgiveness. "We made a mistake. Please spare us from the lawsuit." Awakened and furious, I shouted, "Stop disturbing me." Never having seen me so angry, they were taken aback. Grabbing my father's wooden sword nearby, I firmly warned, "Come any closer and I won't overlook it." My former mother-in-law and Ryder looked terrified, whispering, "We're so sorry. If you were really sorry, you'd have changed your ways. Don't ever show up here again," I added sternly, noticing the flashing lights of a police car. Apparently, the neighbors had called the police, who promptly took my former in-laws away. My former mother-in-law tried to say, "She tried to attack us with a wooden sword," but the police dismissed her claim after I explained that I only grabbed it for self-defense due to their late-night disturbance. Frank, who had been nearby, testified that my former in-laws had harassed me repeatedly, and the police concluded that their actions were malicious. Finally, peace was restored. Following Frank's advice, I reported the incident, and with his testimony, the process was smooth. He even joked, saying my voice was terrifying that night. Soon after, a restraining order was issued, and my former in-laws never bothered me again. Someone had recorded the late-night commotion, and it ended up online, making them the talk of the neighborhood. It's uncertain how they're living now, but they're likely relying on the retirement funds of my ex-in-laws. As for Frank and me, we grew closer over the next few months, and eventually, he confessed his feelings, and we started dating. Frank always brings a smile to my face, and the time we spend together is truly joyful. It feels like this happy turn of events is a gift from my father, filling me with gratitude.